You are now live. Yeah, Schlock West in the morning, Dash Radio, the spin room, you know what it is.
Hey, yo, what up, party peoples? We back at it again, man, on this Tuesday. You know you got your crew with you. I'll be your man, Bigg Pwee. That's Big Les, DJ Ron C, and Jay Tasha in the building, man. And I'm excited about this one, Big Les. I'm going to have to say, and I think DJ Ron C is too, man.
Man, you know I'm telling you, man. I'm hyped, man.
Excited is not a big enough word. I mean, I'm not even going to mince words right now because we're talking about somebody who is a game changer, who has been elevating the culture, reinventing his artistic enhancement on the DJ tip, and truly has been taking the world by storm, keeping everybody sane during this pandemic in a way that you can't even imagine, like to the point from our parents to the millennials, and his body of work is crazy.
Yes.
Shall we give the people just a little taste of what he's been doing?
Let's bring him into the building and then we can do that.
All right, let's
do that. All right, man. Spin Room fam, put your hands together, make some noise, and give it up for our friend DJ Cassidy in the building.
Woo!
Hey guys,
how's it going, my man?
How are you?
Everybody's doing good.
Yeah, we are honored and excited to have you here. Like, I'm ready to party. I know Pee Wee's ready to party. Ron C wants to get all up in your DJ business. It's like,
my honor to be here, Les. I'm really excited.
Thank you. I can't believe that my little post was like, and I didn't even finish it because I was going to do this whole big thing and that you DM'd me and I was like, staring at the screen like he knows me. Oh my God.
Look, I want to tell you something. It's crazy for you to say that because I grew up watching you and all those rappers who were part of that show, I saw by watching you.
It really felt like a Rap City reunion. And I just was like, did he do the show for me? Because that's how it felt.
And so for you to, I don't know, I guess be surprised that I saw your, post. I'm surprised that you saw my show and posted it. I grew up, I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 watching Rap City like a student. And so all those people that were involved in Pass the Mic Volume 2, they really were my heroes as a kid. And, where was I going to see them? There were only a couple places on TV, and you were one of them.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. But I posted Volume 1, 2, and I made sure that my parents got to see it because, and they just was like, who is this kid? And how does he know everybody? And wow, Smokey looks good. And, it was just, you brought light to so many people of so many different generations that we got to tell our audience your history. We got to go on, Pee Wee.
You definitely got to school me.
So where, you tell me where you want me to begin.
So, I want to ask this question first.
Yeah.
Because I'm loving the background. Is this a real background? Are you actually in a living room, or is this like just a screensaver of a background?
This is very much my living room.
Yes.
And hold on, I gotta turn my volume up. This is very much my living room, and this is the coffee table, and the turntables were never on the coffee table. I have disrupted my living room for several months, and I think my girlfriend finally, she finally understands why. I don't really DJ sitting down too often either. It just, in the beginning of the pandemic, this is where I set it up. And at first it was so awkward, but now, I don't know, I'm kind of used to it.
Kind of comfortable now. So let's jump into it, DJ Cassidy. Once again, thank you, my brother, for taking the time out your day to hang out with the Spin Room crew. Let's take it back to the beginning, from day uno, because I know that you started in music at what I think you said like 10 years old or so. You wanted your turntables at 10.
Yes, for my 10th birthday, I asked for turntables and a mixer. It's the same turntables that are still over there.
That is crazy. Yeah. And I'm going to say this because I know me at 10 years old, I wasn't thinking about turntables.
Well, I I'll take you back about 5-6 years before that.
Okay.
So this is a memory I have, which some people say I've conjured up this memory through telling the story, but there's no way that I could remember something when I was 3 or 4. I feel like I remember it. So my grandmother used to take me for walks through Central Park, and she's still alive. She's 93.
Oh, that's a beautiful blessings.
She'd bring me back to her house, which was not far from the park, and I'd be sleeping in the stroller. So she'd put me in the other room to sleep it out. So I remember waking up in the stroller one day, and there was a movie on TV, and it was called Breakin'. And I can't imagine 4-year-old me saying, "Mama, can you record that movie?" I don't know how it happened, but I became obsessed with Turbo and Ozone, like obsessed. And I would spend a lot of time at my grandmother's, and I would go into her drawers and I would get her scarves, like her fancy silk, scarf, and I'd wrap them around my head like Turbo and Ozone. So this is like my first hip hop experience as a child, and I don't know how she knew to record it, but she recorded it. And my parents bought me the soundtrack on vinyl. I still have the vinyl from then, Breakin' 1 and Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. Yeah. And, I would try to break dance. Never quite figured that out. That was my earliest memory. And then soon thereafter, I became obsessed with Run DMC, obsessed. So I don't know how one led to the other or who exposed me to it, but, somehow I was. And I just looked at the three of them, Run, DMC, Jam Master Jay, as just like superheroes. They were just larger than life to me, and I still do think of them like that. And so, that was really the beginning of my obsession with hip hop. And I rapped as well, because who didn't?
Right.
And I was better at that than the breakdancing, so it was, I was getting there, but I wanted to DJ, and so I don't know, how that's.
But let me ask you this, DJ Cassidy. You say you wanted to DJ after watching Beat Street. How did
Breaking?
Breaking. I'm sorry, Breaking. So you saw Jam Master Jay, and so that. He was your introduction to turntables?
Well, the only DJ seen in Breakin' was really Ice-T. I don't know if you remember, but he DJ'd in Breakin' 1. He rapped in Breakin' 2. It should have been Beat Street because I was a New Yorker, but that wasn't what was on HBO that day. So it was Breakin'. Had it been Beat Street, it would have been a whole different thing, but actually not. It'd have been the same thing, really. And so, I don't know how DJing came in. I guess in Breakin' and then Jam Master Jay. And then, as I got older, 8, 9, 10, I think the movie Juice just kind of solidified it because who didn't want to be a DJ after that? That was just Omar Epps just made you want to be that.
And that soundtrack to Juice was just stupid.
It was the greatest. And speaking of sitting while DJing, he sits in the scene, when he makes the mix, which I always found interesting. I was like, are you sitting? Because no one sits.
Right.
But now I'm sitting, so it's, full circle.
How much of New York has shaped who you are as a DJ? And we'll get to you being a fashion guy as well. And were you ever interested in doing the whole DMC competition, scratching and spinning and all the other stuff like DJs?
I don't, no, I was never a scratch master. I don't know if I didn't put my mind to that because I wasn't great at it, or maybe, I don't know. I was more concerned with rocking the party. Mm-hmm. And they were always two different things, and they are two different things.
Yes.
So I was less obsessed with the winners of the championships and more obsessed with Kid Capri, and so that's the path I took. And so I asked my parents for turntables for my 10th birthday, and, you know, pretty much the greatest gift of all time, and the rest is history.
Absolutely.
I don't think they ever expected anything from it, and neither did I. I mean, this was, you know, a few decades before Scratch Academy and before there were DJ sections in every Best Buy. And before every little kid knew what it was to be a DJ, obviously before Serato and computers and, you know, so this was not like a game plan. It was just, you know, doing it because I loved it and because I wanted, you know, to take part in the culture in some way. So, you know, there was no really big dream. In fact, all I ever wanted was for my favorite rappers to know me. I swear to God, that's what I wanted. I mean, when I was 10 years old, I just wanted to know Tretch. That was the next phase after Run DMC. I thought Tretch was the coolest person to ever walk the face of this earth. And I remind him of that every time I see him.
Isn't it crazy though, like when you actually meet your heroes, that you can have either experience? It could be the most disappointing thing in the world, or it could be the best thing that's ever happened to you.
It's the inspiration behind Pass the Mic. So as we talk about that, I'll tell you that. But that what you just said was the inspiration. My relationships with my heroes and me wanting to try to give that feeling to other people. That was precisely the inspiration. And I've never met an idol of mine in hip hop who let me down, ever.
That's beautiful. That's dope.
I was never a sports person, you know. I only cared about Michael Jordan because of the sneakers. I never watched any kind of sports, and I saw Michael Jordan once when I was 12 in a hotel, and I asked him to sign a pair of sneakers, and he said no.
Oh, man.
But, you know, I mean, I've heard that from many people. But my idols in hip hop, I've never been let down. I can't think of one, to be honest with you.
That's dope. That's really dope. So let's fast forward, and you're in New York now, and you rocking a club in New York, and this big name person is sitting at a booth at the club, and he's liking what you're playing. And this guy ends up being Sean Puffy Combs.
Well, there were quite a few steps from age 10 to 18 or 19 to get to that club that he would even be at.
Right.
But it was the beginning of me getting a little traction in the nightlife of New York City. Kind of as I just kind of went over the curve of my little small world of school and little underage parties and finally breaking out into the cool scene.
Right.
But not yet at a point where I'm doing like every hot night at every club, like getting one here and there and starting to break into it. And so I was at this club in New York City, Lotus, which was around for a long time, but it had just opened. And I really wanted to play there. So I took like a whack night, and it was pouring rain, and I was in like the downstairs whack room of the whack night. And it was kind of empty. I remember it being empty. And, you know, I was playing like the soul classics of the 70s and 80s. And he just kind of appeared. I didn't realize he was there. And, you know, at that time, you know, this was like, you know, Diddy runs the city. I mean, he just was the energy of New York. You know, he was the energy of nightlife in New York. And I don't mean even just him as a person, but him and the music and the culture that he created really was the energy of New York City.
Right.
It was like Bad Boy and Rockefeller, and like what they represented was just everything. You took that away from New York City and the nightlife, you know, declined, really, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came up to the dance floor and he started dancing, as I remember, really kind of by himself. And 4 a.m. came, and the manager of the club came up to me, and he was like, I assume you want to, you know, keep going, right? And I said, yeah. And so, I remember playing till like 5 in the morning. And so he walks out, and he walks past the DJ booth, and he says, he's like, where's the DJ? And I say, I'm the DJ. And, you know, when I was 18 or 19, I looked like I was 8.
Right.
And so he was like, who's been here all night playing these classic records? And I said, me. So he gets a napkin, he writes down his number and says, call me tomorrow. So I was going to college at the time, NYU, and I was a freshman. So I went to class, and I was essentially procrastinating because I didn't want to call. I was so nervous. Like, I did not know what to say, you know, if I got him. And I called him, and I got a voicemail, and it said, God is the greatest. Beep. And I was like, that gave me no time to prepare what I was going to say. So I basically left the worst message I've ever left in my life. I thought it was over at that point, but it was still cool, you know, gave me his number. It was his voice. It was him. Maybe I'll see him again. Anyway, went to class, left, and I got a message from someone who worked for him saying to call back. And I ran home. I still lived with my mother. And I said, he called me back, call me back. And I locked myself in a room. And I called and I said who I was. And they put him right on. I mean, right on. Like, couldn't believe it, you know? And he was like, yo, Playboy. He's like,
So tough, I swear.
That's classic.
he's like, you killed that last night. And I'm like, thank you. Like, not knowing like how to, you know, how to be cool on the phone. And he was like, how old did you say you were? And I was like, 18. And he's like, and you're a white boy, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, how do you know how to play music like that? And I go, I don't know. Like, it was the most And he's like, you play those records like you lived them. And I was like, thank you. And so he said, I'm throwing a party for the MTV Awards next week. I want you to DJ.
Dope.
And the rest is history. It's crazy.
And the rest is kind of history.
Wow.
Hey,
Wow.
that's crazy.
So with that said, what is your history in knowing all of these soulful classics? Like, what's going on in your house from the age of 5 to 8 to 12 to 15?
So, you know, my mother loves music, but didn't play music in the house like that. My dad did, but he was more of like a rock and roll guy. And when it came to soul, it was like Bob Marley, Superfly soundtrack, James Brown, but not the records that I went on to play like that. So, you know, his love of music was there, but how I got to that music was really through hip hop. So now we're going back again. So when I got my turntables, I was very closed-minded. And I think a lot of my friends were. It was like, if you love hip hop, you hate everything else.
Right.
And we weren't quite evolved enough to know that that really wasn't what it was about. But, you know, as a young kid, you're like, if you love Naughty by Nature, you gotta hate Kurt Cobain. You know what I mean? So that's what I did. I was like, I don't want to listen to anything else. But so now was the next step. So then in my discovery of DJ culture, now I started to try to learn. So then I discovered Grandmaster Flash, Africa Bambaataa, and Kool Herc. So I really came kind of into them later. So now I'm like 11, 12, and now I just think they're like, you know, gods. And seeing the videos of like Kool Herc in the Bronx and the convertible with the speakers coming out. So everything I thought when I was, you know, younger about Run DMC, now I'm thinking about the three of them, that they're like Michael Jordan to me. They're like Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America, and I never watched any of that. So, and in researching them, I realized that they weren't playing hip hop because there was no hip hop. They were creating hip hop music by playing everything. And so that led me to the soul music of the 70s. And so through discovering, you know, the soul, funk, disco, and R&B of that era, I fell in love with it. And oddly enough, that really became, in many ways, not every night or everywhere, but that really became my signature sound. That's what a lot of people called on me for. That's what Puffy was really drawn to me for. And everyone that came after, Jay, you know, J-Lo, you know, Naomi Campbell, Russell and Kimora. It wasn't like, oh, you play the records of the moment so well. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't know. But it was, how do you know that music? So it was really the music of that era that allowed me, to gain the attention of people.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting, as you say that, because I feel like you're like an encyclopedia to music. So when you grab a record, when you were young, going to the record store, going through the crates, pulling out records and stuff like that, you used to study or read who was on the instruments and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, because literally, the one thing that I noticed is the fact that because your albums that you put out,
Yeah.
and the people, even Pass the Mic, Volume 1, the R&B joint, you had Earth, Wind, and Fire in there. And you had, I forgot the young lady's name that you had on there.
Saida Garrett.
She sang with Michael Jackson.
Saida Garrett.
I didn't know who that was.
What?
I promise I didn't. See, I shouldn't be saying this. See
Wrote
that?
Man in the Mirror.
And when she sang, it was like, oh, snaps. But it was, you took certain people, guys on the bass, it was just like, wow. And they play the strings, the horn. It was like, I didn't know that stuff. Like, I just know who sings the song, who produced the song, and that's pretty much it.
So I'll tell you how that came about. When I started to make my own records in 2013, I wanted to capture the sound of that music and try to bring it to young people. So I knew some of the musicians, but I'm not going to claim that I knew every bass player on every record. I knew the artists. So the process at that time, 7 years ago when I started it, was I put all my favorite songs from that era in a list, and they all fell between 1978 and 1982. So it was Michael, Luther, Frankie Beverly, George Benson, Shalimar, Shaka. And so I said to myself, all right, if I'm going to produce a record that feels like this, I can't do it on a drum machine and a keyboard, even if I could really play the keyboard, which I can't. But even if I could, it's more than that. So I researched who played on every song. And it was the same musicians over and over. And so Earth, Wind, and Fire was to themselves, and Nile Rodgers mainly to themselves. But everyone else was playing on everyone's records. And so I literally went after every one of the musicians. And so on the first few singles that I put out, Robin Thicke, Jessie J was the first, I had all these musicians playing. So Earth, Wind, and Fire played on my first single ever. My first single ever was Calling All Hearts, Robin Thicke and Jessie J singing. And Verdine from Earth, Wind, and Fire played bass. Philip Bailey played percussion. John Robinson from Rufus, as in Shaka Khan and Rufus, played drums. Jerry Hay, who conducted all the horns and strings on Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad, and essentially every record of that era, he did all my strings and horns. And Nile Rodgers, he played guitar. That was the only song that Nile and Earth, Wind have ever been on together.
Right.
That song. And so when I wanted to put Never Too Much, Luther, on Pass the Mic, I said, well, Luther's not here anymore. So I called Marcus Miller, who played the bass on the record. And when you see him, you realize that the bass was such a star of the song. A lot of people never actually, never actually saw that until you see it. And then you're like, oh, the whole song is this bass line.
Right. And that's how I saw it. That's exactly how I saw it.
So that's how that started, with the musicians. And Saida, I was DJing an event for someone, like a corporate event, and she was performing. She was singing this was a couple years before that, and she became a friend, I was like, oh my God, Saida Garrett, Man in the Mirror. And she actually helped me a lot. She, when I was trying to meet all the musicians, she must have introduced me to Half. So she's a real friend. And there was no track to show for it at that point. It was just like, an idea.
Is there any part of you that is disappointed or that the artists of today don't recognize the history and the musicianship of only a few years ago or even a decade or two ago? Or do you feel like this is the opportunity for you to be like the professor at hand and teach these kids as well as breathe new life into these legends?
Well, I'm not in a place to judge a 21-year-old because when I was 21, I don't think I knew who played on any of the records. Mm-hmm. And, I was 30 when I started to really know who played on all the records. And everyone has their path. And I didn't put together those records starting 7 years ago, which continue until today. I didn't put those records together as an educational tool. I really did it as a means to create something that I wanted to hear. And in the process, if I was able to educate people who had an interest or who had a genuine curiosity, that was a bonus. Mm-hmm. And I was very conscious of that at that time. I didn't want to go about it with a mission to teach younger people. I wanted people to feel that music through the music that I was making. And if they were able to feel the same thing that I felt listening to those records, then that was how I was going to relay it. And who was ever interested, could learn about it because I shot everything and I filmed everything. But, I think musicianship is an interesting thing to talk about because one of my favorite records in the world of all time would have to be Sucker MCs. Wow. And Sucker MCs has nothing in it but a kick and a snare and a clap. So how can someone who preaches musicianship and does All I Can to work with Earth, Wind & Fire and Nile Rodgers then go and say Sucker MCs is one of the greatest records ever made? And the answer is because the two can coexist. They don't have to be one or the other.
Got you.
So, hey, I'm the millennial of the group, so a lot of my questions are like of today and right now. I want to know if there's any artists. I know you listen to a lot of, or you work with a lot of artists back in the day. Is there any artists today that you would want to work with, or who you like and who you listen to?
Oh yeah, there's a never-ending list.
Who's like your favorite artist, like of today, like you would want to work with or have to work with, or that you love their music?
I could go on forever. I think when it comes to soul music and R&B music, I think the past 5 to 10 years, but really the past 5 years, has really created kind of a R&B renaissance in a sense. Mm-hmm. And you see it coming from people like The Weeknd to Frank Ocean, and now to artists like her. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a real energy when it comes to soul music that there might not have been, a few years prior. And I don't know what caused that, but I love it. Mm-hmm. And from an icon perspective, I love The Weeknd, and of course, I love Bruno Mars. And from a newer perspective, I love her. I not only love her music and her voice, but I love her presence. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the fact that she can stand on stage with a spotlight on her, and before she even does anything, you're feeling it.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so, yeah, I think when it comes to R&B, I think we're, in a really kind of exciting time. And I think that young kids who didn't necessarily listen to soul music of any kind 3, 4, 5 years ago are listening to it now. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's an exciting place for soul music.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm a neo soul fan, so yeah, I'm right with you.
Has it been a goal of yours to transform the perception of the DJ, especially with this Pass the Mic or some of the projects you've worked on?
No, if I'm being honest, no. I don't think I have ever consciously wanted to transform the perception of the DJ, but I did want to do new things that were never done. And I guess one comes from the other.
Right.
But consciously, at the beginning, there was no conscious anything. I was just doing what I love, a little kid in a room, and it connected. Once it was connecting, I did thrive off of the idea of doing things that had not been done. And I didn't necessarily know what those things would be. I just liked that idea and looking up to Run and to Russell, Andre Harrell, my mentor before he passed a few months ago. You know, they all did things for the first time. They were all, you know, the first. And so that was exciting to me. So if there was any way to take part in that or do something for the first time, or even just to take part in the culture they created, you know, I mean, I really looked up to those guys. And not only what Russell and Andre did, you know, with music, but just with culture. And from a New York City perspective, growing up and trying to do what I wanted to do, they were everything. They were like the arbiters of culture, the, you know, the tastemakers that were creating not only the records, but the fashion and the lifestyle. And so I was lucky enough, you know, through time, to not only be able to call them my friends, but really my mentors. And Andre will be very missed. He was, you know, a very, very special person with a smile and a heart like no one. Putting aside all the amazing things he did in music.
No, I agree. I think we both probably have a special relationship with Andre, as I work with so many of the uptown artists because of him and because of Puff from the beginning. So I understand, you know, those feelings.
Yeah, you are now live